Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Bagby. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah, doing well. Hope you're doing well.
Doing good. Thank you for making time for us, and the community to share some thoughts about what comes next, after this election. How do you see this problem with the tension within our community as we approach this upcoming election? I want to know, do you see this as just another testimony that we have a lot of work to do as far as trying to create some type of platform or consensus, or do you see it more of a healthy thing and a healthy sign for the community?
Well, I wish the different points of view were healthy. I don't think they're very healthy. But I mean, the way that we move forward is to respect one another. To me, we start with that and we end with that. Because even though I might disagree and disagree very strongly, still we have to accept that these are our Muslim brothers and sisters, and that ultimately we have to understand we're going to have to work together. So lessening the tension, lessening our kind of attacks is the way to go. And we're very late in the election process. Election is just a little over a week away. So that boat has already sailed. And can we kind of repair those tensions that have boiled up? That becomes the challenge. And I think even like MANA and other organizations, we can play a part in trying to bring different people and their points of views together to make the point that we have to respect one another and that we have to always have an open door for working together in the future.
You said that at the top of the question, as soon as I asked you, you said, well, I don't think that the differences are healthy, or something to that effect.
Well, no, because I strongly disagree with the people who are advocating for a third party, especially the Green Party. So I think that's a terrible mistake to have any part in possibly electing Trump, who would be a disaster for our community.
So
So
you,
I just very strongly hold that position. But I respect the other side that feels that it's time to look for an alternative, because I also feel we should look for an alternative.
Mhm.
I very strongly believe in that also, but I think strategically it would be a terrible mistake to do anything that might allow Trump to win.
So I mean, I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper there because with as you said, like we should try to lessen the tension. I think you said that, like we should try to, maybe Mana could be involved with that, or there needs to be an effort to lessen the tension. But I'm gonna give you two or remind you of these two things that are often said in the community. So one is the story about the people on the boat, you know, and you have some people in the bottom of the boat, and they keep going up to the top to get water, and then go back to the bottom, and then one time they say, "Hey, you know what? The water's right beneath us here. We just can just drill a hole in the bottom of this boat and get the water." And it says that if the people on the top of the boat don't stop them, everybody's going to drown, right? The whole thing's going to drown. And they also have this other statement of the hadith of you should help your brother, whether they are being oppressed, or they're the oppressor. And when asked further about, like, how do we help our brother if they're oppressing someone else, and the answer was, you stop them. So when you believe these scenarios that you're at the top of the boat and the other people are trying to sink all of you, or you believe that your brother is either through their vote or their actions oppressing other people and you have to stop them. And you know, you if you believe that you have the right understanding of Islam and you know the society and you know there's killing, there's wars, there's genocide, uh, it's so much that people really, it's not just a disagreement. It's like at the core of, um,
Well, for Joshua, I would say both examples are inappropriate.
okay.
Uh, our situation is not to that extreme where our boat is going to sink. And it's not to the extreme that one side is an oppressor or not. So, you know, that's the type of rhetoric I think that, uh, you know, uh, ratchets up the temperature
Mm,
unnecessarily. These are strategic questions, and you know, our community will continue. Our mission will continue. The story is not told. We're still at the very beginning of our story as Muslims in America. Is trying to plant and establish Islam in America. We're not, you know, we're just beginning. I mean, the boat is still in the dock. We're still making the boat, right? So
mm. Okay. Well, I'll accept that. Then I, you know, again, this conversation is generally focusing on like where do we go after the election, but I think there's a certain amount of critique or reflection on how we got here. So as you say, we need to tone it down in that notch or lessen the tension. If the scenario that I gave is really like inappropriate, how would you say? I mean, because you've been in this Muslim community for uh you know probably twice my lifetime. So how do you think we got here to the point where um there's relationships that are severing in the Muslim community right now over this election?
well, you must realize that in the even 1980s, 1990s, the Muslim community was much more divided.
Mm,
I mean, when you think about the relationship between African Americans and, you know, you use the word immigrant Muslims, brothers and sisters, I mean, there was hardly any relationship. The ethnic groups, the various ethnic groups did not have strong relations. So, I mean, actually, we're in a much better situation. In the 1990s, who was involved in politics? Nobody. I remember Jesse Jackson. This would have been in the late 80s, right? Jesse, or was the early 90s? Jesse Jackson came to the ISNA convention. He was running for president. I guess that was about 1988, I think. And he castigated the Muslims. He said, "What's wrong with y'all?
mm,
Get off your butt and get involved." And that was true. Muslims weren't involved. So, I mean, I do have a kind of a long perspective of, to me, a clear sense of the trajectory of the Muslim community. And the fact that we are regularly on the front page of the New York Times, lead articles or lead pieces in CNN about where are the Muslims and the Arabs. Come on, I mean, this is great.
mm.
I mean, this is so much better. This is such an advancement In fact, I've never seen this before, where we are a concern. Uh, so, I mean, this is great. I mean, we have advanced. I think we are still immature in our kind of political viewpoints. I think we still do not have a consensus of how we move forward. That is my concern. But also I think to myself, well, maybe that's natural. Maybe, you know, it takes time for a mature consensus to develop as to how we move forward. But then also a part of me says, come on, humans, they're going to agree, they're going to have a consensus. Are you kidding me? So another part of me says that that's probably romantic, thinking that we're going to have a consensus. But I would like to see some solidification of an agenda, a strategy that to me would be could be called a very mature, and to me more Islamic. Um, because when you look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam in Mecca, it was very step by step. It was very carefully, strategized. It was not emotional. It was not, if y'all don't do it, I'm out of here, or, forget y'all. I mean, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his Meccan strategy was very carefully crafted, and it was not emotional.
So you're saying that from your perspective, and you say you have a longer view than maybe some others, if you're quoting, conventions that happened in the 80s and remembering the lack of communication and lack of collaboration between, I know it's hard to come up with terms for people, but the, African American Muslim community and the immigrant community. And so you're saying now what you see, even with all the disputes and the social media clashes and people calling each other out on what kind of Muslim are you, you're saying that this is a overall better from where we were in the in the 80s. Okay.
Definitely. Definitely. At least we're talking about the issues and we're involved with the issues.
You said a couple other things that kind of lead into some questions that I had for you. So like in this you were talking about, okay, are my thoughts too idealistic? I mean, we are humans here. I mean, from the story of Adam and his children, there's always been clashes. Even immediately after Rasulullah, there's clashes with his family members and things like that. So, hey, we're human. We're probably going to keep disagreeing. But considering that in this political climate that's happening now, what do you think are some ways that our diverse, strong opinions, and even opinion of what Islam is, like there's some not by like definition, but like this is un-Islamic, or this is the Islamic thing to do, because everybody's vote is based on their religious beliefs. Whether they're voting for Kamala, they base it on their understanding of Quran and Sunnah. With whether they're voting for a third party, they're basing on Quran and Sunnah. And I would have to assume that the Muslims who are going to vote for Trump are basing it on, that I like to think everybody's trying to do the best that they can. So how do you think that we are able to move forward as a Muslim community as we hold our strong opinions that really often just push us apart?
Well, one of the things I think we can all agree on is that if we hold fast to Quran and Sunnah, we don't fit in any of the political parties. We cannot feel totally comfortable. And so the idea that we are unique, I think, has to be accentuated. And that is something I think we can all agree on. We need to develop a consensus on our point of views in regards to the issues facing America. First, we have to define our principles. We're not capitalistic, not totally. We're not socialistic, totally socialistic. We're somewhere in the middle. Well, let's define that. Let's define, our principles. And then let's start the harder process of devising policies of what we would advocate in America. And that's much harder because principles, we can go back to Quran and Sunnah and really kind of mine it. But policies, are based on wisdom, which is a combination of divine guidance, analysis of your situation, analysis of yourself and your own resources and things like that. So it's much more complicated and again depends on wisdom, which is often hard to find. But anyway, to me, that needs to be done. And then we look for allies. First, we look for allies who agree with us, who are conservative when it comes to family, sexual issues, and very progressive, very liberal when it comes to issues of economics and inclusion. Well, maybe that's the wrong word, but anyway, anti-racist, that type of thing. So, and there are groups like that among the Catholics, with the evangelicals, with the Jews. There are groups out there. I would like to see us develop relations with them and then focus on policies that we will support from the Democrats. We will agree on policies that maybe we'll support with the Republicans. And who knows, maybe the way we construct it will mainly be with the Democrats. I can't imagine right now with the Trumpism that dominates Republicans that we could ever kind of, work with them on things. But I'm sure Trump won't last too much longer. But anyway, the Republican Party will evolve just as unbelievably it evolved from Lincoln to a very conservative party at the turn of the century. But anyway, the 20th century. So, as Malcolm said, we only have interests. And I would say we only have principles. We only have policies. And we find those who will work closely with us, and then we find amongst the two parties those issues that we might work closely with them. But we don't need to be defined by any one party. But that doesn't mean that at times, and this is one of those times when we make very clear strategic decisions that it would be harmful to our community and to America in general if a person like Trump won the presidency.
So there's three things that I wrote from what you just said. One is, when you talk about an agenda and direction, and I want you to connect the first MANA convention or conference, because I remember that being on the flyer forging a national agenda, and how much of that initial conference title comes from your thoughts that you're sharing with us now. Was that kind of uh, an issue with the original founders of Mana, that this is the issue, that we don't really know where we're going as a community, or we haven't articulated it for the masses to say this is where we're going, get on board if this is where you're also going?
Well, actually, the beginning of manna, I must say, Dr. Joshua, is very similar with how your ideas of how to start to formulate an agenda. For one, you can't try to tackle everything. Okay, yeah, agenda, but you can't, identify everything. You got to identify a few things that might be called top priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And even those top priorities constitutes an agenda. This is our agenda. We need to work on these boom, 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 these things. And that's how matter started. I don't know if you know, Brother Joshua, that, we had many meetings putting our heads together to try to figure out what are the top priorities. Um, and so that had nothing to do with politics, for one. I think even in early 2000, when we got started, there was a reluctance of Mana leadership to become involved in politics. None of the African American groups that developed in the 60s, 70s were interested in mainstream politics. From the
let's,
nation, um,
let's
it,
talk about that. Let's talk
wasn't a
about that.
priority.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I'm glad you brought it up. And for those listening, this is a very transparent conversation. Um, you said early Mana, a lot of the people involved were not interested in getting involved with mainstream politics. I remember when I was coming up, the voice of disengaging and not voting and not being part of the political process in so many communities, immigrant and otherwise, was very strong. Um, where does that come from your own experience being in the community? Where's that coming from? Why are people, even like now, we're having a conversation about how important it is. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. You know you you if you don't get involved to change your condition at all, somebody else is going to change it and go in different directions. So like, where was that coming from? Because these are our founders, these are our leaders. They're not ignorant. They're very wise. They're very knowledgeable about their own condition and history. So where would you say that comes
Well,
from?
again, things have changed. What you just, all those things you said, if if you're not on the, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, something like that. Those are ideas that came to be accepted largely throughout the African American Muslim community. They were accepted a little earlier in the immigrant community. And that's because most African American Muslims, like myself, came out of the Black Power movement, came out of the Nation of Islam, came out of a rejection of racist, corrupt, oppressive America. And so there was little appetite for becoming involved. In fact, the Muslims were those who refused the compromise. We were still, as Richard Pryor said, they still wearing dashikis, we were going to stay strong to our principles, right? But we have matured, and we have, I think, come to a consensus that standing on the sidelines, it doesn't provide, it's not a way to realize your interests. And that being marginalized is not something that should be accepted. So no, as I said, there was a reluctance in the early 2000s, but it was not, I should say, it was not rejected, the idea of political involvement. But there was, well, why would we want to become involved? There was a reluctance. And I think that attitude has changed. I must say, Imam Muhammad, rahimahullah, led the way, I think, in terms of saying we should become involved. I don't think he let other people try to organize in that way. It just never became kind of a, I don't know, I might be wrong about this. I don't come out of Imam Muhammad's community. I respect what he did. And I respect what he did in terms of emphasizing that we are American Muslims and that we should be involved. I don't think it really led to kind of an organization whose effects, went down to the grassroots. And that's what we need to do. We need to come together. And I must say, African Americans have their own perspective, so they need to come together first to kind of identify their own points of views, and then work with other Muslims, our brothers and sisters who have come from overseas and their children. So it needs to be a united effort, but the whole idea of manna is that African Americans are naturally going to have a unique perspective because of their history. Mm-hmm. And therefore, they need to put their heads together first and then sit at the table with other Muslims to try to work out, as I said, those principles that underlie everything we do, and then those policies that we are going to be advocates for.
A theme in this conversation that you said a few times, and I also heard it at a recent event that I went to with to talk about the political situation, is this term political maturity, and that person argued that that the Muslim community was not that politically mature, and that moving from voting is haram, not that all Muslims were there, but I'm saying this loud voice of voting is haram to the point where we are now today, when you're saying that this is better than wherever we were in the 80s and the 90s. He's saying that's movement, that's good, but getting out to vote is like stage one. It's like kindergarten, and so how do you move up to more mature, whatever that looks like, areas of politics. So I wanted to know if you could just tell me a little bit more about what that means to you about politically immature, and what does political maturity look like? Are there other communities that you can point to from your experience?
I hate to say it, but for those people advocating voting for a third party or not voting at all, to me, is political immaturity, because it does not, your equation, or you're not really doing good math. Your math is off. Your analysis of your interests and how your interests will be impacted is off. So to me, the Democrats, Biden and Kamala Harris, have not got a ceasefire, and therefore they should be punished. Well, yes, but maturity should tell you that historically no politician, no political party has gone against Israel. It's going to be a sea change. It's going to be a big historical change when a political party, when a major politician said we're going to shut off the spigot of military support for Israel. I think it's coming, but it's going to take time. My God, I mean, and again, the equation of what Trumpism means is, and the detriment and the harm he's going to, if he is elected, the harm he is going to visit on Muslims in America is unacceptable. So I felt that, this idea, I'm not going to vote, I'm mad at the Democrats, and therefore I'm not going to vote, to me is immature. It's too emotional. It's not a good, mature, sit back and calculate your interests. But I've outlined already what maturity should look like, and that is developing a clear vision of principles and then having robust discussions over, because policies change. The principles shouldn't change. Like wealth should be shared. I mean, that's a very fundamental principle in Islam, right? Wealth should be shared. But now, what are the policies based on wealth should be shared? That's much more difficult, and that will change and evolve over time. To me, that's where we become mature. I don't know of kind of a document that kind of lays out those principles for us and starts the process of developing those policies. To me, that is a signal of the growing maturity, if we can do that. And I think that is really a first step, and again, that's understandable. We're new to this game. We shouldn't think that, we've been in this a long time. No, this is all new. So
So let
that's
me.
my vision of maturity.
So I'm gonna come in and remind everybody that this is man is a 501c3. We are not
Yes.
pushing any political party or telling people to vote any particular way. But I'm gonna push back on
So
some.
again, Joshua, yeah, this is a personal discussion between me and you. This has nothing to do with manner point of view or
Yeah, thank
policy.
you. But I want to say something, since the people that you're kind of talking about are not in this conversation, because I was, and I want to make sure that in the way that I address this, that I keep pushing this towards what do we do next? Like what's coming after the election, not so much, what's at stake now. But I would say when you talk about the principles. So I was speaking with a Muslim who is voting third party, and um, became quite offended when people would categorize them as was just categorized of, because this particular political party didn't do something or is doing something that you believe is a red line. Like there's no way that I can support them after this, and this is my way of punishing them. They said that's not what I'm doing. They said actually what you said. I've I've determined what my principles are, right? I know that very clearly from Quran and Sunnah, and I feel like I have the responsibility every single election to vote for the person who most closely aligns with those principles. Doesn't have anything to do with uh, um, who is winning or losing. It's just a principled vote. Maybe somebody say vote your conscience or whatever. So just on principle, like, what do you think about that mindset when people go into elections?
Yes, but this particular election involves the potential of great harm. To be frank, if, you know, maybe McCain was running, I'd probably still vote for a Democrat, but it's not as cut and dry. I mean, the differences between the two candidates in other elections maybe were not that different. This election, the differences are so great. The potential harm is so great. To ignore that, to belittle that, to poo-poo it and think it doesn't matter, and I'm going to vote for my principle, it is not wise. It's not wise. And anyway, to say that, you know, you're going to, you know, go with the Green Party on that one issue.
It's not one issue for them. I'm just saying, like,
Well,
it's about the finance that you said. It's about uh,
yeah,
healthcare. It's about like so many things, and they get offended when people, because I'm sure there are other people who are voting just to punish. Like that's their political strategy. We're going to punish them, and maybe your argument would be good for them. But I'm saying for other people who say that they don't fall into that category, I know my principles, and when you get encouraged to leave your principles for, you know, when you think the sky is falling. And for instance, like torture is a good example of people leaving their principles because they think the stakes are too high, right? And so, or what America did to Japan, you know, the stakes are too high, and so we got to do. So this like this, it's this weird line that I think can sometimes take people outside of their good character, is when the stakes are so high that, because even in Islam, there's a general understanding, right? If you're dying, then some of the things were haram become halal, right? You can eat pork, you can, you know, do other things to survive that you wouldn't have normally done based on your understanding. So I just feel like it's, for me, it's about, okay, when somebody does that and you believe they are the source of creating so much harm in the Muslim community, or the condition, how do we fix those relationships?
again, you policy and how you act in a particular circumstance is partly based on principle, but it is partly based on an analysis of your situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Mecca, there was a man. His name was Uthman, just like the other Uthman, but he was a different Uthman. He decided that his clan were led by Kuffar, and he had nothing to do with Kuffar. And so he renounced his clan leaders. Did Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam denounce his disbelieving clan leaders? Did any other of the major any other companion renounce their disbelieving clan leaders? Some of them who were oppressing Muslims, did they denounce their leadership? No, they didn't. Now, later in Medina, he called people to do just that, to denounce and leave the political protection, security of their clan, but not in Mecca. Why? Well, because it would have been foolish. It would have been, in principle, possible, because there is a compromise. You're accepting the leadership of Kufar and many of the ways they do things. But in those circumstances, it was wise, because the alternative would have simply led to bloodshed and would have led probably to the early demise of the Muslim community. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wisdom by which to navigate, to compromise when necessary, to stand strong when necessary, leading up to the ultimate revolution. But and I think we're in that same situation. Yes, principle, but in your circumstance, you have to bring wisdom, which is an analysis of, basically how your interests will be maximized and not harmed, right? So you can follow a principle, and that principle leads to a bad result. And this would be one of those examples. You might say you follow principle and, vote for a third party, but the harm that it would bring would be great. And therefore not wise.
Well, Allah knows best.
Allah knows best. Yes, of course, of course. And that's where the unity comes from. That's how we should maintain unity. I mean, this is my heartfelt belief. This is my heartfelt analysis, but you're still my Muslim brother and sister. We still need to work together. So it's not like, we disagree, I ain't, that's the end of the relationship. No. Wait, our relationship goes way, way, way beyond who you vote for in next week. So,
well, that's gonna be my last question to you. Is I'm gonna test that brotherhood right now. So I mean, you've seen me grow up. I think you've probably known me since I was about somewhere between 12 and 15 years old. And I'm 51 now, so that's a long time. And so, but let's say I'm gonna give a scenario. Let's say Joshua Salam as an individual votes third party. Okay, based on whatever reason I vote. And let's say I'm a principled person and I feel like this third party really aligns with what I believe is Quranic, what I believe is the tradition of Rasulullah. And let's say I argue that I've made my wisdom, let's say my wisdom tells me that this is the long game. And I'm saying I'm shooting shots at the people who are voting for, one of the major parties. And I say, look, these people are just thinking short term. We got to get out of this. What do they call it? We got to get out of this. The two-party system is called what? I don't know. But this binary two-party system. If we keep doing that, we're never going to be able to do something else. So that's my wisdom. And I vote third party. And let's say you vote Democrat. Now, afterwards, two different scenarios. The funding for the genocide continues. Another 40,000 people are massacred by your candidate, and that's right now. That's already tearing the Muslim community apart. Right? People are breaking down all over the place. I'm dealing with students who are breaking down. It just the weight of that many people dying is too heavy for anybody to bear. And now another one. Oh, I'm coming for Dr. Bagby. I told you, man, why are you out here saying this and that? What's best? Okay, that's on your side. On my side, let's say I vote my thing, and then Mr. Trump becomes president, and then there's a Muslim ban. People are getting put in prison. Everything that they thought was going to happen happens. And then you might be coming for me, Brother Joshua. See, that's what you out there talking about, this third party. See what happened? That's the type of rhetoric that caused us so much harm. You have a role in this. It's in your hand. And I know you and me wouldn't be like that, but I do know that some.
Well, it might be.
Okay. So how do Muslims at that point? Let's say the worst case scenario on
it's easy, Joshua.
Wait a minute. How do they come back and establish?
It's easy. We're going to demonstrate together.
Okay.
against Kamala Harris and her presidency if she doesn't stand up. We're going to mount as much pressure as we can. We'll all agree on that. And if Trump, in fact, maybe Allah's wisdom is if Trump comes in, it'll unite all the Muslims. We will be united and maybe mobilized. Because, you know, they're talking, his people are talking about closing down Muslim organizations. You know that. Taking away their 501c3. There were efforts to do that when he was president. And if he appoints people in all the different, you know, levels of government, like he's talking about, there won't be any, you know, kind of stopgap for doing crazy things like that. But anyway, the point is that we'll be united on whatever happens. The unbelievable massacre of people in Gaza, or if Trump does all kind of crazy things and comes down on the Muslims, we'll be united together. It doesn't, I mean, we do have principles and interests we should follow. And again, my point is that to me, our next step is to try to develop a consensus on those principles and that policies. And that's something I think we can all agree on. I am not, by saying that I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris, and I hope other Muslims do also, it doesn't mean that this is a, you know, an endorsement, a lifelong membership in the Democratic Party. You know, that's what Malcolm said. You know, there are politicians Malcolm agreed with and, you know, said that, you know, voting for them is good. But that doesn't mean, you know, and they were all Democrats. It doesn't, and Malcolm made very clear, it doesn't mean that, you know, I'm totally now, you know, bonded with the Democratic Party. No, we have interests, principles, and policies. So I think that's the way for us to go, you know, so that we can be independent minded and pick carefully who we work with, and then those policies will join with the Democrats or the Republicans in trying to realize.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I just want to say, just even within MANA, you know, for the community out there listening, within the MANA board, there's disagreement. There's people voting different ways, and we're still a MANA board. And within the Muslim community, there's going to be people voting different ways, and we're still a Muslim community. And so and within a family, you know, I know some mothers and fathers and cousins are going to be voting differently, and inshallah, we hope that they still maintain their family ties. And what I hear you saying is that no matter what happens, there will be a reason to work together and unite together after the election, and hopefully we can make this as a new start to maintaining that relationship, because it's like a muscle. You know, if your organizational skills aren't used, you can't just organize, you know, like that. It takes practice. You got to make some mistakes and some failures and some successes. And so perhaps if you're right that the Muslim community starts to work together more and we stick with it, perhaps we'll be in a much better situation. And maybe this is the best situation. Like you said, Allah knows best.
That's
but right. I appreciate your time. Any final words for us before I let you go?
Not really. Not really.
But we still cool, right? We still cool.
Of course. You know, my best friend, Antar Smith, we argued all the time. I remember one time a brother was with us and we were arguing, and he just looked so startled. He said, "Oh my God, y'all, what's going on? It looked like, you know, y'all going after one another." I said, "No, that's, you know, that's just our normal conversation." So to me, there's nothing wrong with arguing points of views.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Well,
Still
may Allah.
remain the best of friends.
Ameen. Ameen. May we be friends in this life and the next. And may
Ameen.
Allah guide our community, protect our community, and make us of those who are able to put ourselves in a position to stand up for justice in this life and create ease and in the suffering of as many people as possible. But thank you so much, Dr. Bagby. Appreciate you and all your work and all that you've done and all that you will do in the future. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
The time has come for African American Muslims to come together to drive action. We realize that one person alone cannot find answers to the unique needs of the Black community. But when we put it in the hands of our community, it can pave the way for progress and address our issues. At MANA, we are committed to working together to make America a country where justice, equality, and righteousness reign, and the legacy of Islam lives on. We are driven by a passion to serve and the desire to strengthen African American Muslim communities. Let's come together and raise our collective voice to address our community's issues. This is the perfect time to join the MANA Network to address issues that seek solutions. We joined with other organizations in a historic project to assess the state of the African American Muslim community. Go to manajustice.org to learn about the results and to join the MANA Network.